Coriolanus. I love this play. And I've been fascinated by this play since the first time I saw it. And I saw it, and it pains me to say this number, 40 years ago. I was 5. It was at Stratford, Ontario, and it starred a very young Colin Feore in his first big Stratford role. And I'd never read the play. It was so powerful, I remember moments in that production to this day, 40 years later. And I've been fascinated by this play ever since. And one of the research projects I'm working on right now is going to largely focus on Coriolanus. So it's a play I know pretty well. And it's a play that I think fits into what I've described as the general theme of the 4 plays in this year's Bard season, which is the quest for identity. And we've talked about that in Taming of the Shrew and Shakespeare in Love and All's Well That Ends Well. And in this play, we have a man who has been defined by his environment, been defined very strongly by his family, his mother, and tries to reinvent himself, tries to make himself anew, tries to assume a new identity by wiping clean the slate of his past. And he doesn't succeed. A couple of other things that are interesting about this play is how it fits into Shakespeare's career. This play is written about 1608. It's the last tragedy Shakespeare writes. The first tragedy he writes is Titus Andronicus. Titus Andronicus is set at the very end of the Roman Empire. Coriolanus is set at the very beginning of the Roman Republic. Titus Andronicus is about a military hero who retires to Rome and is destroyed by the corrupt politics of that city. Coriolanus is about a military hero who tries to engage with the politics of Rome and is destroyed by that city. Titus Andronicus is about a man grieving for his daughter. Coriolanus is about a man trying to escape his mother. So a series of interesting parallels there. There are differences. Titus Andronicus is not a real historical story. Shakespeare took a series of different adventures and created a sort of fantasy world of late Rome, whereas Coriolanus is based very closely on Plutarch. Now, Plutarch was a Greek/Roman historian, 2nd century AD, who wrote a book called The Parallel Lives, a series of short biographies of Roman and Greek heroes and politicians. And it's Shakespeare's main source for Julius Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra and Coriolanus. And if you ever get a chance, read this book. Unlike a lot of books that are written by classical authors, it's very readable. It's very anecdotal. It's a pleasure to read. And he takes the story of Coriolanus. He makes some changes, but he sticks pretty close to what he believed was the historical record. Modern historians question whether Coriolanus actually existed or not, but Plutarch treated him as a real historical figure, and so does Shakespeare. So there are some differences. All right. The other thing to think about in this play, and I'm going to give you a summary of the story in just a second, is this is the very beginning of the Roman Republic. Rome is not an empire in Coriolanus. Rome is a city-state in Italy. And there are other city-states, there are other tribes of Italians fighting each other. So when Rome goes to war, it's not like we're used to the movie Gladiator or something where you're conquering Britain. It's not like that. It's a small state, small tribe fighting other tribes within the peninsula of Italy. Okay? All right. So the play begins with a nascent food riot. This is interesting. The play was written in about 1608. There were food riots in the streets of London in 1608. There was a dearth of food, and people were beginning to suspect that the king, James I, who had only been on the throne for 5 years, was not the people's friend, that he was a nobleman who was out of touch, that he cared only for the aristocracy. And that is exactly what this crowd that we see, the first thing we see, this mob of people, are saying. The aristocracy, they're hoarding grain, they're starving us. The senators of Rome are starving us. It's the beginning of the Republic. The political system is in flux. What we have is basically the noblemen, the aristocracy, the rich people are running the government. And the poor people, the plebeians, are freaking out. So they said, we're going to revolt. Okay? And who are we going to revolt against? Caius Marcius. Caius Marcius, of all the noblemen, he's the one that hates us the most. We're going after Caius. Before they can do that, another nobleman walks on stage. His name is Menenius. And they say, oh, Menenius, yeah, he's okay. For a nobleman, he's all right. And Menenius comes on stage and says, hey, I'm going to tell you guys a story. And he launches into this story about the human body. And it's an allegory of the political state. And this idea of the body politic, of comparing the government to the human body, was a very old one and a very popular one in Shakespeare's time. And in a lot of these stories, they say, well, the state is like a body. The king is the head. The eyes and ears are the counselors to the king. The strong arm are the knights that defend the state. The legs are the peasants that support the state, that sort of thing. Menenius's argument is that the senators of Rome are like the tummy of Rome. Sure, it looks empty, but it's actually providing food and nutrition to the whole body. So you hungry peasants should just be quiet. And while he's making this condescending argument, in walks Caius Marcius. And we get our first look at this hero. Sorry, I have to use two hands here. And the first words that Caius Marcius speaks, when he comes on stage, he looks at these plebeians and he says, what's the matter, you licentious rogues, that rubbing the poor itch of your opinion make yourself scabs? Ew. And one of the citizens says, we ever have your good word. So this is how he talks to them all the time. And then he goes off and he goes on and insults them and compares them, to geese, to foxes. He that depends upon your favor swims with fins of lead. Hang ye, trust ye? No. He hates the common people. This is visceral contempt. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. So he comes out, he does this, and he's especially angry because he's just found out that there's a new innovation in government. The plebeians are going to get political representation. They're going to have 2 tribunes to represent them. And Marcius just can't even believe this. How can these scabs have political representation? So he's furious. Right? He's furious most of the time. Then something happens that actually makes him happy. Someone comes in and says, guess what? There's a war on. And he's thrilled, because war is the best thing in the world for Marcius. They're going to war against the Volscians, and the Volscians are another tribe in the Roman Peninsula. And this really excites Coriolanus, because the head of the Volscians, their best soldier, is a man called Aufidius. And Aufidius, Marcius thinks, is the only other soldier in the Italian peninsula who's as good as him. And they hate each other. And they fought each other before. He can't wait to fight him again. He has this line, and there are a lot of good lines in this play, which people don't know as well as they Hamlet, but I want you to memorize some of them. And this is what he says. He says of Aufidius, he is a lion that I am proud to hunt. Okay. Easy to memorize. And next time someone just says like, so you playing golf with Bernie this weekend? He is a lion that I am proud to hunt. And so we get then war, and we have these war scenes. And Coriolanus is a killing machine. And they lay siege to one of the Volscian towns called Coriolanus. And they're sieging Coriolanus. The Volscians push the Romans back, and then our friend Marcius says, come on guys, let's attack again, and charges into Coriolanus. His soldiers don't follow him. It's sort of like, Henry V. Once more into the breach, dear friends. Henry runs in, but no one follows him. So all the other soldiers go, not me. One of them says, in the pot. That is, he's meat stew. Right? He's going to be cut to pieces. The doors shut on him, the city wall shut on him, so he's alone inside the enemy town by himself. And everyone else is just like, well, I used to like him, he's whatever. And just assume he's dead. But then a few minutes later, the gates open, and there he is, drenched in enemy's blood. He's basically killed the entire town by himself. All right, so I mean, it's just a superhero moment. And he also gets to fight Phidias, and they have this, let's see if I can find it quickly, this one moment where they meet on the battlefield. I don't know if I can find it. Sorry, maybe not. It's hard to do with one hand. Sorry, look online.
Chew on the mic.
Interesting? No, okay, I found it. These two men, these mortal enemies, meet on stage. And Marcia says, I'll fight with none but thee, for I do hate thee worse than a promise breaker. Phidias, we hate alike. Not Afric owns a serpent I abhor more than thy fame and envy. Fix thy foot. So we're going to have it out here. And Marcia's constant, he says, see all this blood on me? That's not my blood. That's everyone in Coriolanus that I slaughtered, right? It's not my blood, right? For thy revenge, wrench upon thy power to the highest. So he purposely makes Phidias angry so he'll fight harder. I mean, that's how macho these guys are. And this, by the way, well, we'll talk about this production you're going to see. This is Shakespeare's most masculine macho play, by far. So, their fight is unfortunately broken up by some common soldiers, much to their, disgrace. But the Romans win, and Gaius Marcius is named Coriolanus because he took the city of Coriolanus, right? So he's given this honorific, and he returns to Rome in triumph. And waiting for him in Rome is his wife Virgilia, their son, little Marcius Jr., and his mom, Volumnia. Now, mom has some interesting parenting ideas. She says, when he was, well, first of all, they hear, Virgilia and Volumnia hear that Marcius was wounded in the wars. And Virgilia, of course, the wife says, oh dear, oh no. And Volumnia says, oh, he is wounded. I thank the gods for it. Another wound. Right? What could be better? And I won't find it right now, but at one point she talks to Virgilia and says, when he was just little, I sent him to war and kept sending him to war. Right? And I built him up. I made him into this killing machine. We'll talk more about Volumnia in a few minutes. But he comes home, mom and wife greet him, and then mom says, now you can run for consul. And consul is one of the highest offices in the government. So he says, I don't want him, mom. You've heard of like the stage moms that push their daughters and sons. You've heard of tiger mom, dragon mom. Played by Colin Wheeler in this production. She is a force of nature. So he said, okay. And so the Senate says, yes, of course you've been consul, but there's one thing. You have to get the votes of the plebeians. Not only that, you have to put on a simple gown, stand in the marketplace, and talk to them. And he has such contempt for the plebeians. This is the worst thing that he can imagine. And he says things like, well, make sure they brush their teeth. And he forces himself to do it. And it almost kills him. But something amazing happens in this scene. The plebeians, who he's always hated and not tried to hide it, they're amazingly generous to him. And they give him their voices. They say, well, yeah, you have been a hero. You have suffered for Rome. God bless you, sir. Yes, you have our voices. And it's a really interesting little political moment. He's, okay, fine, I'm done, I can go. And as soon as he goes off stage, the two tribunes, the new tribunes, the people who represent the plebeians, they come in and they realize, if he's consul, we're in trouble. So they go to the plebeians and say, Marcius was making fun of you. Coriolanus said, he didn't really want your opinions. He's manipulating you. He's always hated you. And the tribunes whip the people into a riot. Right? And if you play like Julius Caesar, very often Shakespeare depicts mobs as fickle, right? They sway this way, they sway that way, right? This is exactly what happens here. Oh, he's a good guy. Coriolanus, we'll give him the consulship. What? He disrespected us? No, death, death. And so Coriolanus, who thought he was going to be a consul, suddenly finds out that the plebeians have turned on him. He says, what? They just told me that they vote for me. The tribune say, no, 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 no. And he loses it. He is such an angry man. He explodes. His mom says, shh, just fake it. He tries, can't do it. And so he starts shouting at these people, and finally the tribunes pass a motion against him and say, okay, you're banished from Rome. Banished. And here comes the next great line. Hang on, hang on, hang on. Another line that I want you to memorize. If I can find it here. Darn it. Sorry. Yes, here we go. Found it. Okay. I should know, memorize it, but there's another part to it. So when they say, okay, you're banished, he said, no, I banish you. And then he walks away saying, despising for you the city, thus I turn my back. There is world elsewhere. See, that's the line. Next time you leave a party, where are you going, Bob? There is world elsewhere. Walk out the door. People will remember your exit. So, where does he go? He travels to the city of Antioch, to the house of his mortal enemy, Aufidius. He shows up at Aufidius' house and says, look, kill me. If I was afraid of death, you're the last man in the world that I would have saw that. Or, let me join you, and together we attack Rome. And Aufidius says, hell yeah. And so Coriolanus joins with the Volscians, joins with Aufidius, and they march on Rome. And the Romans freak out. The tribunes, they really freak out, because everyone says, this is your fault. Yes, it is. And they know it is. And so they send representatives. They send Cominius, a friend. They send Menenius, a friend, to Coriolanus to say, stop this, please. Come on, don't attack your city. And what we get, though, is Coriolanus has tried to rewrite himself. He's tried to get rid of all emotions, all his associations with Rome. And there's these descriptions of him. Cominius has just come back from meeting him. He's with the Volscians, and he says this of Coriolanus: he is their god. He leads them like a thing made by some other deity than nature that shapes men better. A thing made by some other deity than nature. A little later, Cominius says this of him. When I called him Coriolanus, he would not answer to, forbade all names. So he's rejecting his name. He was a kind of nothing, titleless. So he's trying to make himself a complete blank, a killing machine. Menenius goes and sees him and says this of him: when he walks, he moves like an engine, and the ground shrinks before his treading. Wow. So his image, titleless, a type of nothing, invented by some other god, a machine of killing. He has totally reshaped himself. And so the Romans pull out the last hope they have. They send his wife and mom. You knew where this was going. And his wife, I would not want to be Coriolanus' wife. He doesn't spend a lot of time with her. And when she says something, he's like, yeah, whatever. But when mom starts talking, when mom gets on her knees and begs, he fights it, he tries not to give in for the longest time. And then finally, she pulls that great mom trick, guilt. Sorry, let's back up here. Sorry. Darn it. There. Yeah, so she kills him. She finally says, okay, you don't want to listen to your mom, okay? She stands up and says, this fellow had a bullshit to his mother. I'm not your mom, all right? His wife is in Coriolanus and his child like him by chance. Ooh. Oh boy. And then we get a stage direction, and there are very few explicit stage directions in the Shakespeare manuscripts that have come down to us, and the plays that have come down to us, and very, very few that describe a gesture. But we get the specific note about a gesture. Mom is about to stalk off back to Rome, and we get this. He holds her by the hand, silent. So we get this beautiful moment. Mom's about to stalk off, everyone's going to die, and Coriolanus reaches out, just grabs her by the hand, and just stands there. And we know he's sealed his fate. And then he says, oh, mother, what have you done? Okay. What? Well, as he says, you have won a happy victory to Rome, but for your son, believe it, oh, believe it, most dangerously you have him, with him, prevailed. So he recognizes, okay, I'm going to give it to mom, I won't kill Rome, I won't destroy Rome, but this is going to kill me. And so it does. He settles a peace with Rome, and then he goes back to the Volscian camp, and now Phidias, who has been jealous of the fact that the Volscian soldiers have been worshiping him like a god, taunts him, calls him a series of names, says you're a traitor, and then hits him with the ultimate insult. He calls him a boy. Yeah. It's all about your mom, isn't it? You boy of tears. And as he is wont to do, Coriolanus just explodes in anger, and then Phidias' men fall on him and kill him. And the play ends. A tragedy. So, wow. Right? Incredibly macho, and it's so interesting to have a production in which the two leads are played by women here, and this version you're going to see directed by Dean Paul Gibson. He sets it sort of in the future, and we have Phidias and Coriolanus played by women. And when he told me this, I was like, Dean, come on, dude. I know this play. He was right. After 15 minutes, you don't even notice. It works just fine. But the big problem is not the gender problem. The big problem with this play is you have a dramatic persona, so your main character is so unlikable. Yeah. He's awful. Right? Why? I took my sons to see the film version of this. Joseph Fiennes did a version of this movie some years ago, and after we went out, he'd never read the play. He just said, oh, it's the whiny mama's boy. Yeah. He's so full of contempt. He's so full of anger. He's so unreasonable. I mean, Macbeth is more sympathetic. Macbeth kills the king. Macbeth has children slaughtered. But when Macbeth dies, we're like, oh. I'm not sure we feel that with Coriolanus. Stab him again. Which has an impact on this play. It's a tragedy. If we have time, I'll talk a little bit about tragic theory. So how do we do that? Well, one of the things especially when you're reading the play, you don't get is, or when you see it, you do is in battle, in those scenes, and even those scenes of explosive anger, he becomes charismatic, because any character that is active on stage attracts the eye, attracts our attention. There's a charisma to energy on the stage. And Coriolanus has energy, tons of it. I was thinking of other productions that I've seen. There's a recent production at Stratford directed by Robert Lepage, and there's a production of Donmar Warehouse in London starring Tom Hiddleston, which I've never seen so much blood on a stage. They had to squeegee it during the intermission. And so he's got that. The other thing about him is he's honest. He is painfully honest. Menenius says he's so noble he can't lie. His own mother tells him, look, lie to the people. Say you like them. I hate them, you hate them, just lie. He can't do it. So he's totally, totally honest. He also, his other virtue is he has a strange sort of humility. They accuse him of being proud, but whenever someone goes to praise him, goes to recount his exploits, he is immediately dismissive. No, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. At one point, he walks out of a room because people are complimenting him. He can't stand to hear that. He is not interested in material wealth. After the battle with the Volscians, he's offered a tenth of all the money and so the goods that they've taken. He says, no, I don't want it. Right? So he does have a good side. Also, he loves his mom. But these things, being honest, right, not caring about money, great for a soldier, really bad for a politician, right? The tribunes, they know where, which side of the bread they're buttered. Is it buttered? Is that how it is? Which side of the butter? I don't know. Carbs, can't have it. So he's not successful. He's most successful when he's not speaking, right? When he opens his mouth, because he can't lie, is when he gets in trouble. So he constantly needs war. And of course, early Rome was a warlike culture, and there's this weird notion in this play that war is somehow healthy. Again, let's just see if I can find this. When we find out there's going to be war. Yes, here we go. After Coriolanus joins the Volscians, and they, okay, now we're going to attack Rome, some serving men are talking about this. He says, oh, then we will have a stirring world again. This peace is nothing but to rust iron, increase tailors, and breed ballad makers. Another serving man says, well, let me have war, say I. It exceeds peace as far as day does night. It's upright, walking, audible and full of vent. Peace is the very apoplexy, lethargy, mulled, damp, sleepy, insensible, right? War is where it's at. So you need those sort of constant wars. Now, why is he like this? Well, he's a Roman, a warlike culture, but it comes down to mom and maybe to genetics. Because there's this description of Marcius Jr., the little boy, how he was playing one day. Sorry, this is some length. So they're talking about this little Marcius is playing. And here it goes. It says, oh, I saw him run after a gilded butterfly. And when he caught it, he let it go again. And after it again, and over he comes, and up again, and catched it again. It's a little boy catching a little butterfly, letting it go and catching it again. Cute. Or wherever his fall enraged him, or whatever it was, he did so set his teeth and tear it. Oh, I warrant how he mammocked it. It's a little boy catching butterfly, and rips it apart in his mouth. Right? And mom says, oh, one of his father's moods. Again, if one of my kids was eating bugs just because he hated them, I'd be worried. But no, Volumnia thinks this is the best thing in the world. And like I say, she sent Marcius Sr. off to wars when he was young. The people of Rome think that she's crazy. At several points, the tribunes say, oh, get away from her, here comes the crazy lady, because she is so forceful a figure. The senators of Rome treat her as basically a lion tamer. Could you control your son? Could you go save Rome by talking to him? And she, of course, is able to do that with that guilt and rejection. But this feminizes Coriolanus. The fact that he bows down to his mother, bows to the feminine, is the worst thing possible in this warrior culture. And this also raises the question of sexuality. And in previous lectures, I've talked about early modern Renaissance sexuality, how it differs from ours. How we define our sexuality as part of our essence, part of our identity. And whereas in the early modern period, they defined sexuality through actions, the things you actually did, what you performed. So we could imagine nowadays someone saying, well, I'm gay, but I've never had sex. And we say, okay, well, you're gay, but you're celibate. Okay, whatever. I'm heterosexual, but I've never had sex. If you said this to someone in Shakespeare's time, they would just look at you. What? If you never had sex, how do you know what? It doesn't make sense. You committed certain acts that defined you. If you committed certain acts, you were a sodomite. If you committed other acts, you're a husband. Do not ask what those acts are. And so you could get people expressing love for each other, but it's not sexual. If you said to them, oh, you're gay, they would have said, no, you haven't done that thing. So no, what are you talking about? So this is important because of this big scene. The relationship between Coriolanus and Phidias, they hate each other's guts. They can't wait to fight each other again. I don't want to fight anyone but you. So there's this weird attraction. He is a lion that I am proud to hunt. And when our friend Coriolanus shows up at the house of Phidias and then says, okay, look, you can kill me or I'll join with you and we'll attack the Romans. This is what Phidias says, part of his speech. And you just tell me if you think there's a homoerotic undertone to this. He says, know thou first, I loved the maid I married. Never man sighed truer breath, but that I see thee here, thou noble thing. More dances my rapt heart than when I first my wedded mistress saw bestride my threshold. Hang on. Thou hast beat me out 12 several times, and I have nightly since dreamt of encounters twixt thyself and me. We have been down together in my sleep, unbuckling helms, fisting each other's throat, and waked half dead with nothing. Now maybe it's me. But there is this wildly powerful homoerotic undertone there, which is perfectly fine. Military men, people, a bunch of men on the same football team can all say, I love you, guy, I love you, bro, right? They can have that as long as they don't do certain things, certain actions. But you really feel it there, and when Phidias sees his own men starting to to follow Coriolanus more than him, there's a sort of weird jealousy. Here's another scene. When Coriolanus is first introduced to the Volscians, a servingman describes the scene. He says this, our general, there's Phidias, himself makes a mistress of him, sanctifies him with his hand, and turns up the white of his eye to his discourse. So there's this weird power dynamic that goes along with the homoeroticism, which has to be changed at the end. And so Coriolanus must die. Now, I want to leave time for questions, but I'm just going to end with a few other things to think about. This play is a tragedy. It's the only tragedy in this year's season at Bard. And we've talked a lot about comedy this season, but tragedy is obviously very different. Now, we know tragedy starts with someone in a high position usually and falls. They have to start in a high position or they have no place to fall from. And traditionally, going back to Aristotle, tragedies have been based on history or what people think is history. As Aristotle said, this makes it more believable because it actually happened. And if you look at, say, Shakespeare's tragedies, a great number of them are based on history or what he thought was historical fact. Now, history happens only to the upper classes.
Oh, right, yeah.
There was no social history in the Renaissance. All the historical record was about the upper classes, about kings and princes and those people. Right? And so tragedy is about the upper classes. And if you look at Shakespeare's tragedies, you'll often see noblemen, Coriolanus, Julius Caesars, Antony and Cleopatra's. And then there will be commoners, plebeians. And very often, as is mentioned in this play, they'll have names like Hob and Dick. English names, English commoners. And remember, this play starts with a food riot that was echoing what was happening on the streets of London in 1608. So there's this sense that the common people are eternal, they don't change, right? Tragedy happens above them. In this play, in a sense, we get the revenge of the commons on the nobles. Last thing to say about this play, the structure of it. The play begins with a mob, it ends with a mob, the mob that Phidias uses to kill Coriolanus. It begins with the lead character being called Marcius. At the end of the play, Phidias refuses to call him Coriolanus and calls him Marcius once more. It begins with that allegory of the body introduced by Menenius. It ends with the dead body of Coriolanus on the stage. The play, there's a tragedy of a man who is unable to escape himself, unable to take on a new identity, someone who could never get away from his mom. Thank you. And now, questions.
Who has a question? Saw you first.
Hi, thank you. I like the point about Comedius talking about he's a nothing, no name. And it's one of my favorite scenes is after the Battle of Coriolanus. There's a person that he forgets the name of.
Yes.
And is there any like favorite theories or like talk behind that?
After the battle at Coriolanus, and he's like wilting, he has this weird moment where he says, they say, is there anything you need? He says, yes, there was a poor man in Coriolanus who was kind to me. I see he's being enslaved. Could you free him? What's his name? I forget. Okay. Now, I actually just wrote a paper on this. Bizarrely. It's almost like I planted him. In the original, in the Plutarch, it's not a poor man, it's a rich man, another nobleman. So it's about Coriolanus preferring the aristocracy even above tribal affiliations. Oh, he's a rich person like me, well, we got to save him. And Shakespeare changes it to a poor man who Coriolanus can't remember the name of. Because all those poor people, they kind of look the same.
Where are we going now?
Thank you. I haven't got this formulated very well, but we've been talking a lot about Coriolanus and his mom. She wasn't so out of line as all that, was she? I mean, when you think about the Spartan legends about the mothers that wanted their sons back on their shields, and I mean, is this part of a cultural trend, or is it just part of his tragedy?
If you look at antiquity, especially if you look at more warrior cultures like Sparta and stuff like that, there was all this stuff, oh yes, and come back with, wounds on the front of you or dead, right? That sort of thing. So in a way, it's not that out of line with some moments in classical history. But dramatically, in the world of this play, and if you haven't seen it yet, just watch Colin Wheeler. She comes across as someone who's living her life through her son, who has made him go to war since he was a little boy, right? Who's thrilled that he's got more scars on his body, right? That is, it is excessive, I think, for us, and I think for Shakespeare's audience too. It would have been too much, even if you can find moments in antiquity where this would have been acceptable.
Way back. Can I reach it this way?
Hi, I was just wondering if there was a word or a view on soldier fatigue or PTSD that Shakespeare was attributing to Coriolanus with his rejection of flattery and status. And was it a psychological thing, like he needed war because it's the only thing he could he knew? Was it a normalcy to create chaos for him he didn't want to be a senator. It was boring. It wasn't his skill set. He wanted to create chaos for himself. It was this whole play about creating his own chaos.
Yes. Thank you. The idea of PS, post-traumatic stress syndrome, not something that exists in this period, that idea. It's not something that Shakespeare would have known about. The avoiding flattery happens even in his calmest moments. And he says it a few times, I have fled words more than I have fled battles, right? So he honestly doesn't like to be praised. He doesn't like to be rewarded, especially publicly. As for the thing about Rome, absolutely. When he hears that war has been declared, in the first scene of the play, he says, I'm glad on it. Then we shall see have means to vent our musty superfluity. So he's thinking there physiologically. We talked about this with the last with Taming of the Shrew, the idea of the humors that circulate in the body that control the dispositions. And if you have too much of one, then you become unbalanced. And you have to purge, apply leeches, have blood let, something like that. You go to the barber, and the barbers would let your blood out for you if you paid them enough, and hence barber poles have that red stripe on them, right, in those days. You didn't know that? Next time you get a haircut, say, Vadim, could you take a bit of blood? I'm feeling... So what he's saying there, that war is a type of purging. We've got superfluous humors in the body. This will make us healthier to have it purged out. So yes, at a certain level, it's a physiological, psychological thing because those two things were mixed together. But I don't think the post-traumatic syndrome part works. The second part works.
The identity of him as a soldier, so putting him in a social situation, even to be praised, would be an abnormal
situation.
For
Yeah.
him. So he would stand and he would look for chaos.
Yeah.
Psychologically.
Oh, so if you couldn't hear that, so as a soldier, someone used to war, someone who rebels in war, to be in this situation of peace, yes, he can't handle it. Yeah, and so he creates chaos. Although I don't think he means to create the chaos in this play. But again, we see this in Titus Andronicus, exactly the same thing. We also see it in Othello. Othello rushes off to defend Cyprus, and when he gets there, the Turkish navy's been blown away. There's no war after all, and now all sorts of bad things happen to Othello. So Shakespeare's interested in this idea of the military man who finds himself without a war, right? And what happens then? These people become so specialized that they can't exist in another environment. Yeah.
So Shakespeare was quite a political writer. You were saying that, the food riots were represented in the streets at the time as well. Was there a parallel with Coriolanus, like a mama's boy in the political at the time?
No, not with the king. No, so what was, I don't want to push this too strongly, but remember, James's reign, when James came to the throne in 1603, people were thrilled, because as much as they loved Queen Elizabeth, she had been on the throne forever, and they wanted to change, right? And so this young man with a weird Scottish accent shows up, and he's their king. But then he spent a lot of money. He gave away all sorts of monopolies to handsome young men. And there was this sense of he's out of touch with the common people. And so we have things like the gunpowder plot. I mean, the Catholics really hated him. And so there's this growing resentment towards him. And we also get a parliament that's increasingly controlled by the Puritans. And eventually this will lead to the execution of his son. The Civil War starts in 1642 and Charles is beheaded in 1649. So this is the nascent. So there's disruption in the street. And I think Shakespeare is not actually that political a playwright, in my opinion. But he also knows that people are interested in what's going on in the world. So things aren't great. He's reading Plutarch, who he's used before, and says, well, this story kind of reverberates with what's going on now. And it gives people that moment of frisson. Hey, I just saw that, and oh my God, right? I'm not sure he's making a strong political point, but he is trying to engage the audience. And I think we have to stop there. It's 5-2, but I'm happy to meet you out in the village and talk for a while later. So thank you so much for coming this evening. Thank you so much.